Welcome back to Thoughts from a Bookworm. I'm Abigail Grace. Today we're going to be talking about the last book in the Tiger's Curse series, which is book 5. It's called Tiger's Dream. This book, let me tell you, is a beefy book. I mean, this book is a chunk. I know we talked about this very briefly last week, but I'm 99% sure that this 5th book was an afterthought. I don't think it was originally planned in the author's mind because so much of what is said and what happens, and even just like character development wise, that occurs in the 5th book contradicts a lot of stuff that was told and happened in book 4. I'm not mad about it because, as I said last week, I absolutely hated like the last quarter of book 4. I'm fine. We want to erase that. And, book 5 came out the soonest. Book 5 came out the most recent. So, yeah, I'm okay if we pretend that a lot of the stuff that happened in book 4 didn't happen or wasn't true or whatever. This book focuses on Kishin. It's first person, but from Kishin's point of view, and it focuses on Kishin and Anamika and their job, their quests and journeys as portraying the goddess Durga and her tiger Daemon. The main quest, because there's honestly so many different quests. There wasn't really like one like overarching plot line for this book because it changes so much. Different stuff, like there's just so much that goes on. Again, I'm not mad about it. It's the kind of book that I genuinely like, where there's no like, okay, we need to get from point A to point B. Here's how we do it. It was like, oh yeah, we need to get from point A to point B, but point A, point 1 is happening over here, and A point 2, and we're gonna jump ahead to point C for a few minutes. Like, it was very chaotic, but it was very enjoyable, and I very much liked it. I loved that we got Kishin first person because I loved Kishin. I like Anamika. I did not think I was going to like her, but she really grew on me. I love her so much now. And I think she and Kishin are just so perfect for each other because she's very, like, battle-hardened. She dealt with some very serious abuse as a child, so she has reservations about, like, men specifically. So I think that her and Kishin's dynamic was very sweet. I like that it kind of built over time. Wasn't, like, instant, like, black to white. It was a very sweet love story interspersed with like all this chaos going around. But one of the main quests that they have to do is they have to re-hide Durga's lost gifts for future Ren, Kelsey, and Kishin to find, which I wasn't a big fan of that plot. It kind of just took some of like the mystery and the magic, I guess, away from the main series because I wanted to know, I don't know, like I was kind of looking forward to getting to know how they got lost. Like I would have liked to see Ren or Kishin and Anamika go on these adventures and genuinely lose their stuff. Like that would have been so much more interesting than them being like, oh yes, this happens in the future. So we have to set everything up in the past to make the future happen. Like it kind of, I know time travel and space-time continuums and that kind of stuff is so confusing, and every single story or movie or whatever does it differently, and I'm okay with that. It just kind of, like, brought up the question, then why? Like, it was just this big why. Like, nothing was ever answered. I would have so much more preferred it if the author took us on, 4 different adventures where they genuinely lose their stuff. Like, that would have been so much more funny to me and, like, enjoyable and make sense versus them being like, oh, okay, this is our job now. We have to go re-hide all of my things so that your future self can find them and bring them back to me. I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of that, but it worked. We also learn in the midst of their time traveling things that both Anamika and Kishin can time travel, not like at will. They have to still do kind of like this special. So Anamika learns how to time travel at will because she's like growing in her power. Kishin is still connected to her, so he kind of has to go through her to time travel, but they each visited each other in their childhood. Anamika went because she was very, like, when everything first happened, she was very, like, guarded around Kishin. Kishin was very hostile toward her because he was in love with Kelsey. He didn't really want to be there with her, so they just kind of, like, kept their distance. Like, they worked together when they needed to. They kept the peace in the village. But other than that, they just kind of avoided each other. So Anamika, at some point, goes back to Kishin's childhood and meets young Kishin when he's like 10. It's like 10 or 11 because I think Ren is 13, so he's probably 12. No, 11. I don't know. She meets a young Kishin who is in love with her right away. He falls in love with her. He shows her his shooting and how he can ride, and she kind of like spends time with him, his like child self, to kind of get to know him and figure out who he is before everything happened. In the midst of all that, he asks her to call him Sohan because he goes by Kishin, which is his middle name. He asks her to call him Sohan. So before Anamika goes back to the present time, she pulls her memories from Sohan so that when they meet in the future, he wouldn't recognize her. So when Anamika gets back to the present after visiting Sohan, Kishin / Sohan, she starts calling him Sohan, and Kishin is like, what? Like, why are you calling me that? He then figures out what she did. He's like, wait, why did you do it? Give me back my memory. So she does, and then that's how we as the readers figure out what she did. And that was very sweet. Like, their whole interaction with her and young Sohan was just so sweet, because obviously there was nothing like malicious on her side. She was trying to get to know him. It was just very sweet. It was sweet to see Kishin, who we kind of suspected but are told that he always felt inferior to Ren in everything. And then when he meets this really pretty grown-up woman who's interested in spending time with him and going horseback riding with him and showing him, she shows him how to shoot a bow and arrow. Like, it was just very sweet, and my heart just like melted for sweet little Sohan, who like finally had somebody who was interested in him, not Ren. Later on, Kishin / Sohan, all these names, goes back, and this is where it gets a little confusing, because in the time travel, and this is pretty much true with every time travel thing, you cannot meet yourself. Like, that causes a major paradox. And one of the things that Kishin has learned is that Mr. Kadam has been like time traveling back and forth to all these different points throughout all of book 4 and now all of book 5. So each time he sees Kadam, he's seeing a different version of Kadam. And one of the things Kadam tells him is, okay, it's imperative that in your time traveling you don't meet yourself. So Anna and Kishin accidentally go back in time to Anamika's childhood home. Anamika's very upset about something. She accidentally brings them back. She gets knocked unconscious. Kishin is trying to like wake her up. These two kids come running toward them, and before he can stop them, he sees that one of them is Anamika, like young child Anamika, who now sees grown-up version Anamika, and she like runs over and like touches her head like, oh my goodness, is she okay? Grown-up Anamika vanishes. Kishin like blacks out, like something happens to Kishin. He blacks out. He wakes up a couple weeks later to find Anamika's household is like up, like something has happened. He finds out she's been kidnapped by a group of, they call them flesh peddlers. They're like traffickers who have taken Anamika. So Kishin goes out to find Anamika. He goes on this major side quest trying to get her back. He's able to track her down. She was sold to this like disgusting man. The book like low-key gets kind of graphic about like what goes on in that house where this man is, and he like owns all these children. Kind of gross. It doesn't get too graphic like in the details, but it gets graphic and like you know what's going on. Like you know what's going on. He finds Anamika, but he's not able to get to her. So he ends up having to plan this escape, leaving Anamika in this man's possession for like a month. She's only like 12 or 13 at the time. She's a beautiful little girl. Like, he knows she's not, the man is not going to get, tired of her anytime soon. He's able to stage this grand escape. He also discovers while he's back in time, he can't turn into a tiger, and he doesn't have his super tiger strength because the timeline has been messed up. So he's literally just like everybody else. That chunk of the book was like the majority of the book. So he's able to get her. He saves her. He saves all these other children, gets them like back to their homes and stuff like that. But oh my gosh, I'm doing it again. But Anamika dies on the journey home. Kishin is devastated because he knows he's messed up like all of history now. He has no way to bring her back. Fanindra appears, and again, this is like, it gets so confusing and there's literally so many layers. I'm not going to be able to explain it right or very well. Sorry, my camera died, so if the angle shifted a little bit, that's why. Fanindra appears. She bites Anamika on her neck and kind of injects her with this like golden venom stuff that like brings Anamika kind of back to life. but like puts her in this stasis. Like she's not alive, but she's not dead. She's just kind of frozen there. Sohan is able to get her back to her house. She does eventually wake up. Sohan then takes her memories of him and goes back to the present where grown-up Anamika has now been replaced. Sohan is like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I did this. The two of them have a very sweet like moment of reconciliation, and they continue on about their quests. And like I said, as they go, as the story progresses, there's a bunch of little, like, because they re-hide the necklace, they go down to the, the bottom of the ocean, they hide the fruit, so they like backtrace, all of the stuff that we've kind of already seen, re-hiding these gifts and falling in love. And I just loved it. I loved how they fell in love because it was so sweet. It felt so like organic and natural, and they had just some very sweet moments of like each one of them kind of like fighting it. Like Sohan had this moment where he wanted to kiss her, but he's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And Amika has this moment where she's like, oh my gosh, I think I love him, but he's a man. Can I trust him? I don't know if I can, be intimate with him, like all this stuff. But at the end of the book, they do get married. They have a very sweet ceremony. Their wedding night is so sweet and precious. It's just that, yeah, the ending. Now, I know that I said that this book did redeem the first four, and I stand by that. This book's ending was also a little wonky, and it was one of those endings also where it was sad, and I felt like it wasn't necessary because it was set up in book 4 that Kishin/Sohan is not immortal. He will age, albeit very slowly, but he will eventually die. Part of the cost for time traveling, in addition to having met herself through time traveling, Anamika is also no longer immortal, and she's also aging. She's aging faster than Sohan. So they get married over the course of like several. I mean, Sohan says they have several lifetimes together. They have, I think, 9 children, which I think is absolutely amazing. They see their grandkids and their great-grandkids, and they're so far removed. But because they're both aging and Anamika's aging faster, she dies first. And it literally made me cry. Like I'm like getting choked up just thinking about it because the way that it was written, it was sweet, and it's like two, old people, on one of them on their deathbed. But it was unnecessary. Like, just end it. Just end it. Like, we know they're not immortal. We know they're going to die. We don't need to see that. So we see Anamika die. I'm going to start crying. This is so sad. We see Anamika die. And then Sohan for, like, centuries, because that whole chapter is called The Wanderer. So for centuries, Sohan is by himself just wandering around. He keeps an eye on his descendants. He makes sure everything is okay. Like, he kind of keeps up the work that he and Anamika did. But it was just, like, sad. Again, it was unnecessarily sad. I'm not saying that every book, that in order to be a good book, you have to have a happy ending. But if you're gonna make it sad, make it, like, for a reason. Because, again, I ended this book and it was like, wow, I'm sad. Like, it wasn't a bad ending. It wasn't like one of them cheated or one of them got murdered or one of them, it wasn't like, oh, wow, that was sad. But it was like, I don't know, it just kind of, like, it just made me, it made me not want to read the last part. And I literally marked in my book, don't read past this point, because it's just sad. And it's just, yeah, so that ending I didn't like, but it didn't ruin anything because everything stayed the same. They were both very happy. There is this kind of weird thing at the very end when Sohan is like ready to die. He like knows he's gonna die. He still can turn into a tiger. So as a tiger, he goes like up to this cliff, and as he's getting ready to die, he like gets this whiff of jasmine, which is what he said all throughout the book, Anamika smells like jasmine and roses. So he gets this whiff of jasmine, and then he hears her voice, and then that's how it ends. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, so is she, like, she is dead, but is she, like, gone on to another realm, or, like, I don't know. That part was kind of weird, and it just, yeah, I can keep talking about the ending, but I feel like if you're gonna end a book on a sad note, you have to have some redeeming quality about it. It doesn't have to be a happy redeeming quality, but there has to be something about it that makes you as the reader want to read it again. Because like if you end a book and you don't want to read it again, in my opinion, that's not a sign of a well-ended book. That's not a sign of a well-written, well thought out, well structured. Bad endings, terrible endings, sad endings, most of the time suck. Like, I'm sorry, they just do. So if you're going to end it on a sad note, give me something. And that's kind of why I think the author threw that in of Sohan getting that whiff of Anamika's like, okay, so they're moving on to the next life together or whatever. But if you're going to do that, just end it when they get married. Like, just end it there or give a little brief this. Don't go into detail about Sohan bringing Anamika back to their honeymoon cottage as she's dying. Him holding her hand as she dies, and then him being alone for centuries. Like, that was just, like, unnecessarily sad, and I didn't like it. Like I said, not many books make me cry. That made me cry, and the last book in the Ember and the Ashes series. We'll talk about that when we get to that, but yeah, so if you made it to the end, thank you guys so much. This is the end of this series, and I haven't quite decided what series we're going to be covering next. I'm debating between two. We will see which one, but if you made it to the end, thank you guys so much. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you never miss an episode.